The people of North Korea really do think that the Kim family is divine. Every single house in North Korea will have an image of the Kim family on a wall somewhere. Every single person that you meet on the street will have a lapel pin featuring a member of the Kim family.
Welcome back to the Science Dilemma. My name is Allan, and I have a question for you today. Can a culture survive if it forgets God? Today's guest, Barry Arrington, is an author and an attorney. He argues that materialism, this idea that nothing exists but particles of motion, is inevitably destroying justice, morality, and even our basic human rights. From Columbine to the U.S. courts, Barry has seen firsthand what happens when we forget God. Today, we're unpacking his new book, Unforgetting God, and why the evidence overwhelmingly points to Christianity as the only hope for truth and freedom. Well, thank you, Barry, so much for joining us today on the Science Dilemma podcast.
Thank you for having me today.
So one of the things that I definitely want to do is highlight who you are. And so I just would love for you to present yourself to our audience so that they could get to know you as well as what you've worked on.
Sure. Well, I am a lawyer. I've been a lawyer since 1987, and I've practiced in the state and federal courts. I've done especially a lot of constitutional law over the decades, and some of the cases that I've been involved in have been very high level in terms of the cultural impact of materialism, which is this idea that nothing in the universe exists except particles in motion, that there is no immaterial force, that spiritual forces are unreal, God is unreal, doesn't have any effect on the universe. In particular, I represented some of the families of the children that were killed at Columbine, where the shooters were very dyed-in-the-wool materialists who based their actions self-consciously on the materialist and Darwinian views. And so over the years, I have tried to sort out why is our culture deteriorating in this way. And it came to me one day that this idea that there is no God, that there's only particles in motion. If you take it seriously, the consequences just kind of follow naturally. So they're not illogical. It's just that their premises are wrong, if that makes sense.
Totally. And so, I mean, with what you do as a attorney, you probably see that so often, how the impact of materialism has on culture, as well as the negative impacts on culture and people.
Exactly. Just last Friday, I filed a case in which my client is a 4'11" woman, and the state of Colorado has decided that it's going to lock her in a cell with a man. And so not just any man, a man that's in prison for killing his wife with a knife.
Wow.
So we are challenging that under the Constitution. But the point is that Colorado is, and its leaders are basically in a materialist mode. They're saying that there is no fixed reality. God did not make them men and women, that you can just change at will. And so this is just another manifestation of the same spirit, if you will, of materialism.
Yeah, I think Bill Dembski had shared some of what you've done, and he is a huge fan of yours, and so he said you guys really need to talk to Barry.
Admiration Club, I can assure you.
Yeah. And then after you and I spoke, I was able to, get to looking through the book, and I really do appreciate the way that you have formatted the argument for Christianity and how you explain from a scientific standpoint, how God is the answer. So could you take us through maybe some of the flow of the book so that people that are listening, as they're interested, they'd be able to see, man, yeah, I really got to read this.
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity. So in Unforgetting God, it flows from why is materialism important? How did it come about? What does it mean? And then in this next chapter, I talk about the definition of materialism, its implications for our worldview, and then the next two chapters, chapters 3 and 4, really kind of focus on my world, which is the law.
Yeah.
Chapter 3 is about where do rights come from. And this was actually a huge deal just this week. Yeah, I don't know if you were watching the news where a senator from Virginia came, who was actually the Democrat nominee for vice president in 2016,
Mm.
just hammered a witness in a hearing for saying that our rights come from God. Well, yeah, you got two options there. The rights come from God or they come from government. And he said, well, you're only religious fundamentalist types, at least he implied, believe our rights come from God. Well, no. If you read the Declaration of Independence, what does it say? We are endowed by not government, not the Congress, not the Supreme Court. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so that's actually a very relevant topic right now. And that's chapter 3
Wow.
of my book. Chapter
Could
4,
we pause there
go
real
ahead.
quick?
Sure.
So yeah, I was excited for you to talk about this because there's a reason that we try to change laws when it doesn't align with our human rights and the rights that were given to us by God. And so what do materialist attorneys and these others that are the lawmakers or law enforcers, how are they even interpreting any of this if they believe that it comes from government, yet we're often telling government, hey, we need to change this law because it's not aligned with what we believe our rights are?
That's an excellent question. And the answer is not well, because there really are two and only two choices here. Either our rights transcend any particular government, any particular person, and if they do transcend it, if there is a transcendent moral order, if you will, from which our rights are derived, that implies that God created our rights, because there's no, when you got two guys or two cultures or two women, who's the judge between them? Only
Yeah.
someone who's above both of them can judge
Yeah.
between them, and that person can only be God, right? Or there's the view that there really is no judging between cultures, or people who say one thing is right and one thing is wrong. I use Richard Posner, a judge out of the Seventh Circuit, as an example of this view. He said, we as Americans cannot say the Holocaust was wrong, flat
Wow.
out wrong, objectively wrong, full stop. The only thing we can say is, by our lights, the Holocaust was right, or was wrong, rather.
Mm.
But who are we to say whether it's really objectively wrong? Because there's no way to judge that. That is a man who was sitting in the second highest court of the land, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals out of Chicago, saying that there's no way to judge that the Holocaust was objectively wrong. And so
That's scary.
those are the options. Yeah. And I also quote, Martin Luther King lived in the time of Martin Luther King Jr. lived in the time of the Jim Crow laws. And the issue that you talked about was very relevant to him, because people asked him, well, this is the law. Who are you to judge the law? What's this idea of legal progress towards a goal, where of moral, of better moral alignment? And he said in his famous letter from the Birmingham jail, a law that transcends God's law, the natural law, is no law at all. And he cited Augustine and he cited Aquinas. And so this natural law tradition that we have in our country runs very, very deep. And the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s was very much based in a natural law conception of our rights.
Why is it, do they not see the contradiction in, like, the philosophical or mental contradiction of both advocating for the people that they believe are the vulnerable, yet saying that the law is the ultimate right giver? Because it's almost like a disconnect.
You put your finger right on the question, right? If you believe in materialism, you believe that the only thing in the universe is particles in motion, and that there is no transcendent moral order.
Yeah.
Then what does that say about human beings. That it says that we are meat robots, that we have no free will, that we have no that morality is a adaptation from our evolutionary past. It's not something that's real. And so, what happens if you apply that to our legal institutions? And the critical theory really does kind of have this right. If you accept those premises, what that means is that all human relationships, every single one of them, whether in politics or in law or in media or anything else, all human relationships ultimately devolve into power games. And
Mm,
and there are the people who have the power and people who don't have the power. They're often called the oppressor and the oppressed. And if you accept those premises, that's true. If there is no transcendent moral order, there's only power, and those who have it
yeah.
and those who don't. Now, the question that you ask is, well, who did we decide who to back? I mean, which dog are we going to have our money on in this dog race? And the answer is there is no good reason that
Yeah.
every preference for any group over another group is inherently subjective and arbitrary, and of course. You say, well, they're choosing the weak and the downtrodden and the marginalized as people to advance their interests. Well, that's just as arbitrary as selecting the powerful, the strong, the oppressors. If there's no choosing between them, there's no standard by which to choose between them, why should you select one group over another? Well, that's
Yeah.
just self-evident, you might say. No, it's only self-evident if you are infused with a Christian worldview, which we have been in the West for 2,000 years. But think about where we were before our culture was infused with the Christian worldview. Women were objects, people were objects, babies were left on the road, unwanted babies were left on the side of the road. Uh, Slaves were just sexual playthings of their masters. It wasn't considered immoral. That's just the way things were.
Yeah. Wow. And so when I know that I paused you kind of on where do rights come from, and then you have lawless laws. That also the same concept.
This very much the same concept.
Okay.
So here, I talk about mainly constitutional law and the federal courts, which I've practiced in over the years, and so you've got the Constitution, and it's a written text. Well, what binds judges to that written text? What tells them you have to follow the written text, and it says some things, and it doesn't say other things, and you are bound by what it says. Well, it turns out that at the Supreme Court level, the only thing that binds the judges is their moral commitment to the democratic integrity of law under our Constitution. And here we are right back again. If they have a materialist worldview where morality doesn't really exist, it's only a stories that particularly clever hairless apes have evolved to tell one another. And you think I'm exaggerating? I'm absolutely not. One of the most famous justices in history, Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., said this very thing. Morality
Mm,
does not exist. The law is only the powerful telling the not powerful what to do. And so, if you're
mm,
a Supreme Court justice who believes that, you have no objective moral obligation to apply the Constitution as written. I say in the book, if you are a materialist, you believe that the Constitution is just so many scratchings that clever hairless apes made on parchment, and who cares what the clever hairless apes 200 years ago said?
yeah. No, that makes sense. Just because what you had said earlier about like the power versus those without power. When it comes to law, when it comes to your field, we're looking for justice, and that justice, it goes further than just who has power, who doesn't, and we just are partial to whoever benefits us the most. But really, we want justice for what is truly right, and then that just goes to what you're saying, that moralism transcends the law,
And that
and
that's
I love that.
exactly that's exactly right from a Christian worldview, a theistic worldview, from a critical legal theories worldview, the word justice, meaningless. It's just a word that the clever hairless apes play in their power games.
Wow. And then so in the book Unforgetting God, you then go into you're gonna have to serve somebody. I'd love to dive into that.
Yeah, that you're gonna have to serve somebody. That is a lyric from a famous Bob Dylan song, and the fact of the matter is, every single one of us understands that we have a longing, if you will, to serve a greater good. Now, the direction of that service is the key, right? As Christians, we understand that longing is properly directed to God and the uh, moral order that He has established. Well, if you don't believe in God, as G.K. Chesterton famously said, or although it's widely alluded to him, if you don't believe in God, it's not that you don't believe in anything. Or it's not that you don't believe in nothing. It's that you'll believe in anything, right? And so everybody still has that urge to serve somebody, and it's compelling, and so they come up with other religions. For example, I say in the book that climate. Um, um, Crisis mania is basically a kind of a religion. That the transgender cult is kind of a religion. The critical theory is kind of a religion. These are all materialist religions.
Yeah, totally. Could you share some of your experience? I saw like the North Korea story.
Sure. Um, and this is a perfect illustration of you got to serve somebody. And I open chapter 5 with it. In Several years ago, many years ago, I was on a mission trip in North Korea, although we obviously didn't
Of
characterize it
course.
as a mission trip while we were there. It was we characterized it as a humanitarian aid trip. And we were visiting a collective farm there. And ultimately, we made a collection. We came up with a bunch of money. Well, not a bunch of money, several $1,000s to buy this farm a tractor because they had no mechanized equipment. And so we were
Mm,
trying to have a relationship with them, and basically the evangelical was personal at the evangelism was personal at that point, and we hoped that ultimately the wall would fall as it had in Eastern Europe, and that we would be able to hit the ground running to these same people and evangelize them on a scriptural basis. Of course, sadly, that never happened. But
mm.
in the book, I tell a story about one of my trips, and in it, I was in a border station between North Korea and China, and it was a hot summer day, and I was standing there, and there was this massive wall-sized mural of Kim Jong Il and Kim Il Sung, the dear leader and the great leader. This was before the current leader came to power, and it was a hot day, as I said, and there was a fan blowing at this mural. And through my translator, I said to the guard standing there, I said, "Well, why do you have a fan blowing at the wall?" And the answer just stunned me. He said, "The dear leader and the great leader must be kept cool." And so here is the most militantly atheist country probably in the history of the world, where you can be killed for bringing Bibles across the border. And this guy is essentially genuflecting before these images like a medieval monk genuflecting before an icon.
Wow. And how did that translate to you in that moment? Like, what were your thoughts, emotions? I can imagine that must have thrown you off like so much.
It was very confusing because I
Yeah.
knew that North Korea was not just mildly atheist; it was militantly, violently atheist. And yet, and so I did some research after I got back, and this is not an isolated event. The people of North Korea really do think that the Kim family is divine. If you think
Wow.
some of those. the images that come back. Every single house in North Korea will have an image of the Kim family on a wall somewhere. Every single person that you meet on the street will have a lapel pin featuring a member of the Kim family, and they venerate that. As it's again the perfect example of Chesterton's dictum: if you don't believe in God, it's not that you believe in nothing; it's you'll believe in anything. And the anything that the people of North Korea have adopted is the divinity of the Kim family.
So then with that chapter, perfectly following it, you then make the case for Christianity.
That's right.
Um,
And so that is kind of the core of the book, is that the first 5 chapters point out the need for choosing. I say, look, you got a choice. Either God exists or he doesn't. If he doesn't exist, you can't have it both ways. If everything is reducible to particles in motion, that means there is no objective morality. That means there is no free will. That everything is determined by pure physical forces. And it really is the case. This is might surprise you. Critical theory is not only correct, it is absolutely logically compelled if you accept their premise that there is no God and materialism is true. And so everything does, in fact, revolve or devolve into power relationships, the oppressed and the oppressor. As you pointed out earlier,
or the prey, or the yeah.
yes, the prey or the preyed upon. As you pointed out earlier, the critical theorist preference for advancing the interest of the oppressed is purely subjective. There's nothing objectively correct about that.
Yeah.
And some might just as well advance the interest of the oppressors. You think, well, that's crazy talk, Barry. No, it isn't. Anybody who has read Nietzsche understands that's where materialism ultimately go. Nietzsche's philosophy was the most natural condition of man, and therefore what we should push is that the strong should dominate the weak. He hated Christianity because it was the slave morality.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting how they borrow from Christianity to then substantiate their claim or their position. And so you'll borrow what we believe is imago Dei, that everyone is made in the image of God, therefore everyone has a right to live, has a right for justice, for mercy, for grace, and all these things. And then they'll borrow that yet function as materialists. And so it's confusing and interesting all at the same time.
That's exactly right. I often say that materialism, everybody acts as if morality actually exists, that it's an objective thing. If someone hurts you, well, that's wrong. But if you're a materialist, you can never say that it's objectively wrong. If you're a materialist, you can say things like Richard Posner said. I mean, literally said, the Holocaust wasn't my cup of tea, but who am I to judge the National Socialist tea preferences, right?
Wow.
And
Wow.
so that's what I'm calling people to do. In chapter 5, I say you've got a choice. You can believe that's actually true, or you can believe that there is a God who has established a transcendent moral order and that he loves you. He's revealed himself in the person of Jesus Christ. And you've got to choose. As Pascal says, he called it a wager. We're betting on one or the other of these being true. And I'm calling on people to evaluate which is more likely. And then in the following 2 chapters, I talk about how the choice of accepting a God generally and then accepting the God of Christianity in particularly is the overwhelmingly more logical choice, the choice that's supported by the evidence far more than any other choice.
On your journey of creating this book, and even as an attorney, what have you seen as the most compelling resources that you're probably your favorite top 3 that you're like, man, when I read that or when I ran across this article, it spoke to me?
Sure. And so in terms of is there an intelligence behind the universe?
Yeah.
Some books that I have read over the years were especially compelling to me. For example, when I was in the early 90s, a book came out, Darwin on Trial by Philip Johnson. And that was kind of my first real introduction into the intelligent design movement, where he demonstrated that Darwinistic evolution is really not strongly supported by the evidence. It is a logical deduction from materialist premises. And if that's where you start with, if you start with the assumption, the a priori assumption that materialism is true, well, something like Darwinism is necessarily compelled as a matter of logic. And so that helped me start a lot. And then other intelligent design books I read along the way were Behe's Darwin's Black Box, where he talked about how biological structures are irreducibly complex and can't be built on a stepwise fashion as Darwinism predicts. Bill Dembski has been a profound influence on my life in his books. He's got several of them, and particularly The Design Inference, where he talked about how if you have two things, a very, very low probability of an event happening, and that event is specified, that you can deduce design, and then I go into that in the book. Steve Meyer, his books, The Return of the God Hypothesis, Darwin's Doubt, Signature in the Cell. There's so many intelligent design books out there. And in terms of the Christian apologetic, Doug Ruteis's apologetics is if you want to have the fundamentals of apologetics down, you can go and you can't hardly do better. Josh McDowell and now his son
Oh,
Sean,
Sean McDowell. Yeah,
Evidence That Demands a Verdict. That had a profound
love that.
impact on me. My two chapters sketch these arguments, but it also gives people citations to these more in-depth resources if they want to follow them.
I love that because sometimes, the layperson just needs someone to piece it all together for them into a book, and then later maybe do a deeper dive on all of these in isolation. But one of the things I really enjoyed was where you talked about what Francis Bacon had said, and I'll just read it real quick. So I think this is in chapter 1 chapter 6, The Case for Christianity. The first page of it is where I said 1. Bacon was a devout Christian, but he understood that superficial knowledge of philosophy, which included natural philosophy at the time, would incline the mind of a man to atheism, but a deeper understanding would bring him back to God. Bacon famously believed in a two-book approaching to knowledge. He wrote, "Let no man think or maintain that a man can search too far or be too well studied in the book of God's word or in the book of God's works." I thought that was powerful. Like something that I often hear from the scientists that we have on, and what I'm hearing from you today is the more you study, the less likely you will be an atheist. If you are truly studying not from the logical conclusions of a materialist, but if you're genuinely just looking at the evidence.
That's exactly right. And Phil Johnson's book was so powerful for me for this very reason. Phil Johnson, well, for one thing, he's another lawyer, so I love that.
Yeah.
And Phil in his book, he said, well, what does a lawyer have to say about all this stuff? And he said, a lawyer's forte is using language precisely, examining unspoken assumptions, and examining the logic behind arguments. That's what we do. And he applied those legal skills to this origins movement, and it really did have a profound impact on me, because I came through the secular education system, and I was pounded and pounded and pounded by materialism and Darwinism, and the evidence. If you don't have anyone giving you the other side of it, and this is what Bacon's talking about, if you have only so much of the evidence. Well, maybe that does kind of sound. Why do we need a God, right? Will Provine said the Darwinist evolution is the greatest engine for atheism ever invented, and he's probably right about that because people are only given half the story. But then when you realize that the evidence is not so quite so powerful as you thought it was, but there's another side of the story, and that it is mainly compelled by a logical deduction from materialism, a religious view, if you will,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
you start going back the other way.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say that. One of my questions for you on the side of the attorney is you have some attorneys that are so good at arguing and coming up with different things, is that if they're biased or they're emotionally charged, then they'll be really good at creating an argument even though they don't fully agree with it consciously. But then if you're going to be truthful about it, you would then do what you do, which is saying, hey, we're going to take emotions and just look at the evidence without the emotional charge. And then, yeah, I mean, it sounds so true. If you have somebody looking at the evidence in the way that you guys do and being able to see I think you had said like unspoken bias or motives,
Yeah.
you're then, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh man, I love that.
So this is particularly true in what's called the theodicy, which I talk about in the book. Uh, if there is a loving, all-powerful, all-knowing God, why do bad things happen? And especially, why do bad things happen to good people?
Or the
And
problem of evil.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
the problem of evil. I go into it in quite a bit of depth in the book because it's a powerful objection. It turns out that the logical argument from evil is not a very powerful argument at all, because if you actually examine the evidence, there may be reasons, particularly the providing for the existence of free will,
Yeah.
for a loving God to give creatures a choice, which includes the choice to do bad, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the logic of it doesn't hold up. But what about what's called the evidentiary problem for evil? Well, maybe there is a God, but how do we know He's good if He lets people
Hmm.
suffer, especially children? And that argument is fundamentally an emotional argument. Yes,
Yep.
it is a very powerful argument. Why does God let this happen? And it's not a surprise to Christians. Christians understand that this is an issue. And how do I know? Because you just look at the book, especially the book of Job. And Job was going, why? Why did you let me do this happen to me? And God comes to Job and he does not explain himself. He says, I am God. Just look around and see what I've created. Look at my creative power. And you have a choice, Job. You could trust me or not. And
That's so
Job
good.
just obviously decided to trust God. He could not understand why God would have let these things happen, not because he was bad, but because he was good. But he trusted God, and God restored him, and we are called to do the same thing. When bad things happen and we can't figure it out, thousands of years after Job, we are still called to understand that God exists. That's obvious. If you look around, the whole universe declares that a God exists. The universe didn't create itself, therefore, it points to something beyond itself. There's so many other evidences for the existence of God. The totality of the evidence overwhelmingly points to the existence of God. Given that, when these bad things happen, do we trust God or not? That's the choice that we have.
I appreciate what you just said because it speaks volumes to what does this evidence actually say? So like the problem of evil, it is a problem. It is something that we desire to understand, but evil existing does not negate a good God existing. it just rises the problem of we don't understand why a good God can exist and he can allow evil, but the existence of evil doesn't remove the likelihood of God being who he is.
That's exactly right. Again, Job never understood.
Yeah.
Job never. I mean, you look at the book of Job, and at the
Yeah.
end, you expect, okay, God's going to explain what happened, why he did this. Nope, that's
Yeah.
God. Job was
Yeah.
just called upon to know that God exists and to trust in him, know that he's good, even though these bad things had happened to him. And nobody dismisses the fact that the argument from evil is a powerful emotional argument. And it trips a lot of people up. I get it. I get it. And just saying you got to trust God doesn't necessarily help these people. But the point of my book and the point of the it doesn't help them to get over their grief, as what I mean to say, the point of my book is that, as you said, it does not necessarily negate the existence of God, especially when you consider all the other evidence. That's one of the things that I talk about in my book. There's not one just point of evidence that we focus on to the exclusion of everything else. Yeah, the existence of evil, I don't understand that fully. I understand it partially, as we've talked about. The philosophers have explained that evil can exist even if in the presence of a good God, if he wants free will to exist, for example. I don't understand it fully. And in particular, I don't understand concrete examples of it. No one lamenting the loss of a child wants you to stand there and tell and give them an apologetic for why their child died. Right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Totally.
but nevertheless, we can know that a good God exists even when bad things happen, and we just have to we hang on to that faith, and there's an irreducible element of faith to everything, every worldview, just including the materialist worldview. They don't know for a certainty that their worldview is true. Do I know for an absolute apodictic certainty that God exists? No, I don't. We are called to have faith. And what does that mean? Well, what do you have faith against? Doubt. And you cannot have faith unless it's possible to have doubt. Paul says this in Romans chapter 8. If you see it, there's no reason to have faith for it, right? But if we have faith in that we do not see, then we wait for it patiently.
Mm. And so your book, kind of tying it all up, has a call to action. And so I'd love for you to give that to our audience, your call to action for them, as well as my call to action for everybody listening is to go ahead and get Unforgetting God, written by Barry Arrington. And we'll put the link in the description so that they can go ahead and get the Amazon, either Kindle or physical book. But what would be your call to action from a practical standpoint?
So in the book, I make a call to action. And that's just not just for Christians. And I hope that the book is helpful to Christians as an apologetic to help them build up their faith and answer these objections. But it's also a call to materialists, open-minded materialists. It's a call to evaluate the evidence and make a choice. And I believe I've made a compelling case in the book that the overwhelming preponderance of the evidence is towards the existence of God, and also towards the empty tomb, and that God has revealed himself in the person of Jesus Christ, who is our only hope. But I also say, you know what? You can't have your cake and eat it too. If you do resolve that materialism is true, then don't be telling me that there are objective moral norms that are self-evident, because that's obviously false under a materialist worldview. You gotta accept the bad with the conclusions that you make. And I say, it is impossible. No sane person can live his day-to-day life as if materialism is true, which means that if you are a materialist, you have to live your life as if your most deeply held metaphysical beliefs are false.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Thank you so much, Barry. This has been a pleasure. I genuinely have enjoyed this conversation, as well I bet everybody else will.
Well, thank you
and
for
again,
having me.
to everyone listening, make sure to check out Unforgetting God.